The hidden philosophical schools of ancient Greece. Beyond the mainstream. The Cynics. Philosophy's original rebels. Welcome to the wild side of ancient Greece, where not everyone was obsessed with Plato's perfect forms or Aristotle's categories. Let's dive into the Cynics, the original philosophical rebels who made mockery an art form. Diogenes of Sinope wasn't just a philosopher. He was ancient Greece's greatest performance artist. While the academic elites debated in their fancy marble halls, Diogenes lived in a ceramic pot in the middle of the marketplace. When Alexander the Great offered him anything in the world, Diogenes simply asked him to move aside because he was blocking the sunlight. Talk about not being impressed by power. The Cynics believed happiness came from rejecting social conventions and living according to nature. They practiced shamelessness as a virtue, deliberately breaking taboos to show how arbitrary social rules were. Diogenes would eat, sleep, and even perform bodily functions in public, scandalizing proper Athenian society while attracting crowds of fascinated onlookers. Think of cynicism as ancient minimalism with a sharp sense of humor. They practiced what they preached, owning almost nothing, begging for food, and trolling the elite. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, Diogenes plucked a chicken and tossed it into Plato's academy, announcing, "Behold, I've brought you a human." That's not just philosophy, that's comedy gold. The Pythagorean cult, math, mysticism, and musical cosmos. Everyone knows Pythagoras for that triangle theorem, but his actual philosophy school was far stranger than any high school math class. The Pythagorean Brotherhood was part mathematical society, part religious cult, and entirely bizarre. New members endured 5 years of complete silence before being allowed to speak in meetings. They believed numbers were the true reality behind everything. For represented justice, 5 was marriage, and 10 was the perfect number containing the entire universe. They discovered mathematical harmony in music and believed the planets made beautiful music as they rotated, the original music of the spheres. But it gets weirder. Pythagoreans refused to eat beans because they believed beans contained human souls. They wouldn't step over crossbars, pick up fallen objects, or stir fire with iron. They considered roosters sacred because their souls contained fragments of the sun. The Pythagorean community owned everything collectively, practiced vegetarianism, except when sacrificing bulls to the gods, oddly enough, and believed in reincarnation. Pythagoras himself claimed to remember his previous lives and could allegedly talk to animals. When he discovered irrational numbers, like the square root of 2, legend says the Brotherhood threw the discoverer into the sea because such numbers threatened their belief that reality was built on perfect ratios. The Eleatics. Reality deniers extraordinaire. In the quiet coastal town of Elea, a group of philosophers developed ideas so mind-bending they make modern physics seem intuitive. The Eleatics, led by Parmenides, claimed that all change, motion, and diversity in the world is pure illusion. Reality, they insisted, is a single, unchanging, eternal one. Parmenides argued that what exists must have always existed because something cannot come from nothing. And if something cannot come from nothing, then change is impossible, and therefore all apparent changes are illusions of human perception. His student Zeno crafted paradoxes so clever they're still debated today. Take the famous arrow paradox. For an arrow to reach its target, it must first travel half the distance, then half the remaining distance, then half of that remaining distance, creating an infinite number of steps that seemingly cannot be completed. Therefore, motion is impossible. Try using that excuse when your philosophy essay is late. The Eleatics essentially created the first unified field theory, arguing that beneath all apparent diversity lies a fundamental oneness. This idea was so revolutionary that later philosophers spent centuries trying to reconcile it with our everyday experience of change and plurality. The atomists, ancient quantum theorists. In the northern Greek city of Abdera, Democritus and Leucippus developed a theory that wouldn't be proven until 2,300 years later. Everything in the universe consists of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms moving through empty space. The atomists argued that atoms are too small to see, came in different shapes and sizes, combining in various ways to create everything we experience. They believed infinite worlds existed simultaneously, with atoms randomly colliding to form new realities. This wasn't just physics. It was cosmic metaphysics on a scale that would make modern multiverse theorists proud. Most shocking to their contemporaries, the atomists claimed that even human souls consisted of special round, smooth atoms. Thoughts and emotions were just atoms moving in the brain. Dreams? Atoms from objects entering your body while you sleep. Gods? Collections of atoms arranged in human-like shapes, residing between worlds. By removing divine purpose from nature and explaining everything through atomic interactions, the atomists created the first truly materialist philosophy. While Plato and Aristotle's idealist theories dominated Western thought for centuries, the atomists' vision of reality as particles in motion eventually became the foundation of modern science. The hedonists, pleasure philosophers with a twist, forget what you think you know about hedonism. The Cyrenaics, founded by Aristippus of Cyrene, weren't just about indulgence. They developed a sophisticated philosophy centered on the pursuit of pleasure as life's highest goal. Unlike later pleasure seekers, the Cyrenaics focused specifically on immediate, physical pleasures, arguing that bodily pleasures were more intense and reliable than mental ones. They believed we can only truly know our own sensations and experiences, making them ancient forerunners of both subjectivism and phenomenology. Aristippus scandalized Athens by openly associating with courtesans, wearing expensive perfumes, and enjoying luxury without shame. When criticized, he famously replied, "I possess pleasure. I am not possessed by it." The Cyrenaics aimed to master pleasure rather than be mastered by it, enjoying indulgence without becoming dependent. Their philosophical descendants, the Epicureans, modified hedonism into something more sustainable. Epicurus taught that while pleasure is the highest good, the greatest pleasure comes from removing pain and achieving tranquility. He suggested simple living, philosophical conversation, and friendship as more reliable sources of happiness than wild indulgence, essentially inventing the philosophical equivalent of Netflix and chill over feasts with friends. The mystery schools. Philosophy meets psychedelia. Not all philosophy happened in the agora or academy. Across Greece, mystery cults combined philosophical inquiry with direct mystical experience through elaborate secret rituals. The most famous, the Eleusinian Mysteries, promised initiates not just knowledge but transformation through direct experience of the divine. Participants in the mysteries drank a special brew called Kykeon, likely containing psychoactive substances, before undergoing ritual death and rebirth experiences in darkened underground chambers. These ceremonies produced profound mystical states that many philosophers, including Plato, considered the highest form of wisdom. The Orphic Mysteries taught a philosophy centered on purifying the soul through vegetarianism, asceticism, and ritual. Orphics believed humans contained both titanic, earthly, and Dionysian, divine, elements, with philosophy serving as a path to liberate the divine spark. Their sacred texts described cosmic battles between gods and journeys through the afterlife that influenced both Plato's myths and later religious traditions. What made these mystery schools revolutionary was their democratization of spiritual experience. Anyone could be initiated, regardless of social status. Women, slaves, and foreigners could participate equally, making these cults ancient Greece's most inclusive philosophical communities. The hidden women philosophers of Greece. History has largely erased the contributions of women philosophers in ancient Greece, but they existed and thrived despite overwhelming obstacles. Aspasia of Miletus, companion to Pericles, ran a school of philosophy and rhetoric so influential that Socrates himself claimed to have learned from her. Plato's dialogues suggest she wrote Pericles' famous funeral oration, one of the most celebrated speeches in history. The Pythagorean school included numerous women philosophers, including Theano, possibly Pythagoras' wife, who wrote treatises on mathematics, physics, medicine, and psychology. Her works on the Golden Mean influenced later Greek thought, while her daughter Demo was entrusted with preserving the secret teachings of Pythagoras. In the Epicurean garden, women studied alongside men as equals, revolutionary for ancient Athens. Leontian, a former hetera courtesan, became so accomplished she wrote a philosophical critique of Theophrastus, one of the leading intellectual figures of her day. Hipparchia of Maroneia scandalized society by becoming a cynic philosopher, living with her husband Crates in poverty and performing philosophical provocations in public spaces. These women had to be exceptionally brilliant to overcome the social barriers against their participation in intellectual life. Their preserved fragments hint at perspectives that challenged dominant male paradigms, emphasizing relationship over hierarchy, embodied experience over abstract reasoning, and practical wisdom over theoretical speculation. The Hellenistic melting pot. When Greek philosophy met the world. As Alexander's conquests spread Greek culture across the known world, philosophy underwent its own globalization. In Alexandria, Memphis, Babylon, and beyond, Greek ideas collided with Egyptian, Persian, Jewish, and Indian traditions, creating philosophical fusions unlike anything in Athens. The Hermetic tradition blended Greek philosophy with Egyptian theology and early alchemy, teaching that the cosmos was a living being permeated by divine mind. Their famous maxim, as above, so below, suggested that studying nature could reveal cosmic truths, laying groundwork for both Renaissance magic and early experimental science. In Alexandria, Hypatia created a philosophical synthesis drawing from multiple schools, teaching mathematics, astronomy, and mechanics alongside metaphysics. Her public lectures attracted students from across the empire until her brutal murder by Christian zealots in 415 CE, symbolizing the changing intellectual landscape as classical philosophy gave way to religious doctrine. Jewish philosophers in Alexandria, like Philo, merged Platonic ideas with Hebrew scripture, developing allegorical reading methods that influenced both Rabbinic Judaism and early Christianity. Meanwhile, Buddhist monks and Hindu yogis exchanged ideas with Greek philosophers in Bactria and other Eastern outposts, creating Greco-Buddhist art and philosophy that showed striking parallels between Pyrrhonian skepticism and Buddhist emptiness doctrines. The skeptics, ancient Greece's trolls or ultimate truth seekers. While other schools confidently proclaimed their theories about reality, the skeptics questioned whether we can know anything at all. Pyrrho of Elis, after traveling to India with Alexander's army and encountering yogis who seemed indifferent to pain and pleasure, developed a philosophy centered on suspending judgment about all beliefs. The skeptics developed ingenious arguments to undermine certainty. Different animals perceive the world differently. Dogs hear sounds we can't. Individuals have conflicting perceptions. Water feels warm to cold hands but cool to hot ones. Cultural norms vary wildly. What's sacred in one place is taboo in another. And our senses routinely deceive us. A straight stick appears bent in water. Rather than plunging into nihilism, the skeptics claimed this suspension of judgment, epiche, led to tranquility, ataraxia, freedom from the anxiety of dogmatic certainty. They followed customs and appearances without claiming to know ultimate truths, creating a pragmatic approach to life that influenced both Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. The later academic skeptics, led by Carneades, developed such powerful arguments against the Stoics that they could argue either side of any position with equal persuasiveness. When sent as an ambassador to Rome, Carneades gave a speech praising justice one day and systematically destroying the concept the next, so disturbing the conservative Romans that they hurried to send him home before he corrupted their youth. Conclusion: the philosophical roads not taken. The hidden philosophical schools of ancient Greece offer us glimpses of intellectual paths not taken, materialist theories that anticipated modern physics, mystical approaches that integrated direct experience with rational inquiry, philosophical communities that included women and people from all social classes, and radical critiques of social conventions that still feel revolutionary today. While Plato and Aristotle's ideas became philosophical orthodoxy for centuries, these alternative traditions continued underground, resurfacing in Renaissance Hermeticism, Enlightenment materialism, modern phenomenology, and contemporary consciousness studies. They remind us that philosophy has always been more diverse, radical, and experimental than textbook histories suggest. The next time you think of ancient Greek philosophy, remember, for every Plato teaching in his academy, there was a Diogenes living in a pot and trolling the elite. For every Aristotelian cataloging the natural world, there was an atomist envisioning the quantum universe. And for every male philosopher celebrated in the canon, there were brilliant women thinkers whose work still waits to be fully recovered and appreciated. In their radical questioning of reality, convention, and knowledge itself, These hidden philosophers may have more to say to our complex modern world than their more famous counterparts. Their intellectual courage reminds us that philosophy at its best isn't about building systems, but about the relentless, fearless pursuit of truth, wherever it might lead.